Hello everybody, welcome to the United Stand. I have got audio. I'm live and welcome to the United Stand with audio. Well, you wouldn't want to do it without it. How are you all doing? We're in a good mood tonight because Rasmus is back. Razmataz, don't call him that. Rasmus Højlund is back in training with the first team. So is Mason Mount. And we've got loads to discuss. We'll talk about the positivity of that and what it means. Also, Erik ten Hag coming out defending Antony after another torrent of abuse. I mean, if Rasmus hadn't returned today, I think this would have been a Prat of the Week special on certain people. Still obsessively going in on Antony. Leave the lad alone. Also, Gary Neville, that's got nothing to do with Prat of the Week, by the way. It's just totally and utterly circumstantial that he is the next segment after Prat of the Week. He's been coming out talking about a new stadium. He is obviously heavily involved in that. He has got no real affection to Old Trafford that would prevent us moving away. We'll have those quotes and what Man United are about to embark on, asking some of you what you would like to do. Not all of you. We'll talk about what that's got to do with that as well. Also, Christian Eriksen has been talking about why he didn't leave Manchester United this summer. And we've got a few other bits as well. Lots to get into on the show tonight, actually. A little bit early because I'm doing Champions League the next two nights. So that's why we're doing that. Looking forward to that. Centimetre, I've literally just answered your show. I want to start off on a personal message, though. I don't like having to do this. It really hurt when Vialli died. He was one of my favourite players growing up. I was massively into Italian football after Italia 90. And Vialli at Sampdoria and then Juventus. Just loved that player. Taken too young. And today we've had the sad news. I mean, look, I know a lot of footballers do die. It's what happens. But there are certain players in my life outside of Man United that just have a big imprint. I love football. Love football. I was at Birmingham Wrexham on Monday. You know, I'll go to football and watch it. I love it. I'll watch it on the TV. I just loved it all my life. And that's why it was a privilege to do the book and talk about that story. But in that story, you'll hear about Italia 90, my favourite tournament. Toto Schillaci, 59 years of age, passed away today. Just fantastic player of my, being a kid really, and seeing him scoring goals in that World Cup for Italy. So yeah, rest in peace to Toto Schillaci. It's you've got to be a certain age to know who he is, but yeah, it was very sad news. Another Italian striker from our youth. So rest in peace, Toto. We will talk about Manchester United, though that's what we're here to do, and I will get into all of that. But before we do, we are sponsored by Boohooman on the show today. You might see me wearing what my daughter just described as an oversized jumper, and it said it looked quite nice. I said, well, it's just my jumper that I wear when I'm chilling around the house, and I actually quite like it. So if you like it, you could get your own or anything else on the Boohooman website with a 10% discount. Link is in the description. Scan the QR code and use the code GOLDBRIDGE. You will get 10% off. On top of that, you can get your clothing delivered to your door right now with that code and get something like this, which I absolutely love. However, Boohooman is also giving away an £800 voucher to one lucky Stand United viewer. Lucky United Stand viewer. To enter, scan that QR code, click the link in the description, enter the competition, and you could be spending £800 at Boohooman. Link is in the description for that. Competition closes, I think, on the 30th of September. But also, they are giving us a bit of trivia. Can you guess the United player? All I'm going to say is I've been thinking about this player a lot lately and just how classy he was. I was born on the 14th of February 1987. I won 6 Ligue 1 titles, 5 Coupe de la Liga and 4 Coupe de France during my time at Paris Saint-Germain. Thanks for that, Boohooman. My French is not great. I joined Manchester United in October 2020. I made my debut on the 24th of October in a Premier League game against Chelsea. I earned 136 caps and 58 international goals for Uruguay. I am considered one of the best strikers of my generation, being given the nickname El Matador. And also, for me, one of the best goal celebrations ever. I just loved it. I'm sure you know who it is now. Of course, it's not Cantona. Somebody wrote Cantona. I won't shout them out. It's Cavani. Cavani is the guy. Don't forget, big shout out to Boohooman. They always give us a little bit of interaction and trivia that is related to what we're actually doing here. So big shout out to Boohooman. 10% off if you want to get your gear delivered to your door with the code GOLDBRIDGE and enter the competition as well. Absolutely fantastic. Right, from one striker to another. Hopefully Rasmus can, go on and have a career where he's mentioned in the same breath of Cavani, because Cavani was a brilliant, brilliant striker. But Rasmus is back in training. This is a smash the like on the video moment. This is big. You know know what? There is positivity around the fan base at the moment. A 7-0 win last night, a 3-0 win against Southampton. I would say that's staged positivity. Not that we're acting, just that we're sort of holding a little bit. We're sort of like, it's good, but hold the line. Let's see what happens on Saturday. It could be a false dawn. Rasmus returning is genuinely positive. I think that having Rasmus back as an option, even if you wouldn't start him, is just really, really important for our front line. I personally think he's our number one striker, and I think he will prove that this year. I think everything about his game is going to be really beneficial to the way that we've played this season. The chances in and around the box. Remember last season, Rasmus wasn't even in the top 50 for chances in the Premier League, yet he was in the top 5 for chance conversion. So more chances, keep the conversion up, he's going to score a lot of goals. So very happy to see Rasmus back in training with the first team today. Mason Mount was there as well. When are they actually going to put on a Man United shirt is a good question. I mean, I was led to believe that Mount wouldn't be back until at least the Spurs game, which is a week on this weekend, so a week and a half away. Will that apply to Rasmus? Well, what I know last week with Rasmus was that it was touch and go. He'd be back for Southampton. So he was close, but no cigar, i.e. he was close, but no risk. Is it now a case that they're going to wait a couple of weeks like Mount and bring him back for the Spurs or the FC20 game? The honest answer is we don't actually need him or Mount for Crystal Palace if there's a risk. And that's a nice position to be in. I mean, you contrast that with last season and you would just be saying throw them in. We haven't got anybody else. But that's the great thing about the current situation. And I do respect it from Ten Hag. If he decides not to put Rasmus on the bench on Saturday because he doesn't want to risk him and get him back properly, then take the time. But he could be on the bench on Saturday is what I'm saying. I think he's very, very close. I think he was very close for Southampton. He's obviously training now. Realistically, what they'll put him through in training isn't going to be massively different to what he'd do with 20 minutes against Crystal Palace anyway, and that might be quite beneficial. So he might make the bench on Saturday, but if he doesn't, I don't think it's the end of the world because you've still got FC20 a week tonight, and then you've got Spurs, and then you've got, you know, other games coming up as well. But having him back is very, very important, isn't it, for Manchester United? What it means to have him back, well, look, I mean, I don't want to start doing polls because I think they're divisive in the sense of Rasmus or Xerxes. It just doesn't seem very, very, very relevant to me at the moment. But I think that obviously I'm massively of the opinion at the moment that we need to certainly make people fight for their place. I want competition for places. I mean, I think Garnacho, I saw a stat today about Garnacho that last season, his stats in 50 games were like, you know, compared to what he's done in his first handful of games, it's incredible what the amount of goals and assists he's got compared to last year. And we thought he had a good year last year. So if he can keep that up, he's going to be incredible. But I think Garnacho probably will be on the bench on Saturday, and I sort of understand why. With Rasmus, he's got to start on the bench. You know, you've got to start on the bench. But I think that having these hungry players ready to come in. One thing I didn't mention on the Agate video, by the way, you know, when we're talking about defensive duels, I'm thinking about doing a weekly stats show, basically, on the United Stand. I mean, I don't know how you can tell me whether you want that, but I'm thinking of having a section at least in a video every week where I sort of spend 5 minutes just giving you the stats, because there was an incredible stat I saw on Mason Mount that he's actually one of the best defensive duel players in the Premier League this year. Now, he's not played that many minutes, but I think in the Fulham game, he was averaging 10 defensive duels in that game. Now, the best player in the league is Calvin Phillips with 12. So if Mason Mount's doing 10 defensive duels in the game against Fulham, that's an amazing amount. Now, what is a defensive duel? A defensive duel is just a challenge on somebody who's trying to attack. You know, that can be their right back, that can be their centre back. So that is something that I think Beth's mentioned it, I think many of you've mentioned it. The work rate of Mason Mount is really important to the press. It really is, and he's very, very good at it. But obviously we need to bring other things in as well, and he needs to stay fit. That's what he needs to do. Shock says, come on, Inter, love the show, Mark. I'm doing a Man City Inter watch along after this. Actually, I'm expecting Man City to win that, but I'm looking forward to seeing what Inter are all about this year. But yeah, Rasmus for me being back is fantastic. I like the look of Xerxes. Obviously, we've been waxing lyrical about Rashford and Garnacho and Ahmad, but having Rasmus back as an option is going to be really, really good, and I think he'll be our starting striker, but we'll have to wait and see about that. Of course, I want to be even-handed here, though. I don't put Rasmus into the same category as Luke Shaw or Mason Mount, far from it, but I have started to see murmurings of, is Rasmus injury prone? I don't think he's injury prone. He's 21. He had to play a lot of football last year, and I think he's, suffered a few knocks and, muscle issues because of that. I think we need to manage him. I think he has to do an amazing amount of work as a striker, and I think we need to manage him, and that's what Xerxes here for. So I don't want to see Rasmus picking up another injury before Christmas and being out for a month or two. So I think we need to manage him very, 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 very carefully. But very, very happy to have him back. Everyone vote to leave save. I want to do this, actually. I do want to do this. I'm just going to drop this in because I think it's important. But let me just do this. New stadium or renovate Old Trafford. Get in on your votes there, because we are going to talk about that in a moment. I wouldn't mind Agate, Mount and Bruno in the midfield. Mount and Agate are very good when it comes to the high press. We might see it, Abhijit. We might see it. And, options are very important. Solace and Solitude, welcome to the Members Club. You're a legend. Red Army says, everyone vote to save Old Trafford and refurbish it rather than throw United's entire history in the bin. Match-going fans love it and want it forever. Paul Thompson, welcome to the Members Club as well. Thank you very much. Well, I'll give you some context to that. I'm about to talk about what's been said about Antony and what Ten Hag has said, because just to drop it in, Ten Hag said he would not hesitate to consider starting Antony on Saturday. So we'll talk about that in a moment, but listen to this. This basically came in from Gary Neville, who has an involvement in the refurbishment of, regeneration. I mean, Gary Neville's going to make a bit of money out of this, I presume. He's involved in a lot of projects around Manchester, and he wants to be involved and is involved in the regeneration around Old Trafford. So I think as part of that, he is thinking as a developer and somebody that, probably isn't that attached to old buildings, if we're being honest, based on what he said. He says, I'm not overly emotional about the stadium. As long as United get a world-class refurbishment or a world-class new stadium, then United fans win. And at least there is an action plan to do something about it after years of nothing. I completely agree with him, by the way. Completely agree with him on that. But he goes on to say, and I don't really necessarily agree with him this, what is it that we'd be saving? Yes, we must keep the statues, the Munich clock or the tunnel. They must be a part of whatever Old Trafford becomes. He says, I get that location of the pitch is important to some fans, but I was at Tottenham versus Arsenal on Sunday. I don't think any Tottenham fans went there thinking about the location of the pitch, and it's different to the one Glenn Hoddle played on. Well, straight away, Gary, don't ever, 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 ever compare White Hart Lane to Old Trafford. With all due respect to Tottenham, what's happened at White Hart Lane isn't worth mentioning compared to what Old Trafford is. We've had the Busby Babes play on that pitch. We've had Sir Bobby play on that pitch. We've had George Best play on that pitch. Yes, the grass gets replaced, but the location of the pitch remains the same. And although people think I've never been to Old Trafford, I have been plenty of times, and any Man United fan that's ever been to Old Trafford, whether it's week in or not, this, you think you love it, and you do love it, but every time you walk up them steps and take that breath, it's different. And I know it's going to be different because it's the club I support, but it's different. I've got friends who've been up there with Villa, Arsenal, Liverpool, and even they say when you walk in, yeah, it's a bit tired and that, but it's still Old Trafford. So there is an aura that we can't, we've got to be arrogant about it. You can't compare Old Trafford to White Hart Lane or the Emirates or Highbury or anything like that. It's Manchester United. So look, what Man United are going to do is they're going to send out a email to every season ticket holder to get their thoughts. I don't think it's going to be, do you want a new stadium or an old stadium? I think it's going to be way more in depth, and you might not get asked that question. You might get asked about what do you think about regeneration in the area, etc. What do you think about the pedestrianisation of Norwich city centre? It might be stuff like that. But whoosh, if you don't know, you don't know. It will only go to season ticket holders. It will not be going to worldwide fans. I actually agree with this because you absolutely cannot. I don't think season ticket holders are better fans. I don't think season ticket. There will be a fan in Australia who is absolutely as big a Man United fan as anybody else, who maybe because of finance or whatever has never been able to get to Old Trafford, and it's their dream to do it at some point in their life. That doesn't make them not relevant. It just means they're on the other side of the world and they might not be able to afford it, and they want to do it once in their life. It's the Holy Grail. But I think you honestly cannot survey everybody. You can't survey every Man United fan. How are they going to get your emails? So I think just doing it for season ticket holders who actually attend games on the regular, hopefully, not all season ticket holders do, obviously, but I'm quite comfortable about that because, what's the point in surveying 2 million people when you can survey 75,000? So let's see what comes out of that. Fan consultation is apparently important, and I think it is obviously important. We'll see what comes out of it. I think for me, it's, as I've said before, I really have got no issue with somebody saying, let's knock it. I mean, I've got good friends, people on the United stand who are saying that they want a brand new stadium and they don't care whether Old Trafford gets knocked down and the new one gets built, 500 metres away. So I understand that. I don't want it to happen. I want Old Trafford to stay. I'm a romantic in the sense that, history means a lot to me, nostalgia. Every Christmas I think about Christmases past and the coloured lights and, the food and the films. I'm nostalgic. And when it comes to football, what got me into Man United was my granddad and those VHS tapes, the story of Man United, the reporter stood outside Old Trafford in the 60s, all of that, the romance of that. When you go to Old Trafford and you stood outside Old Trafford and you know that you're stepping in the steps of, fans that have been going there for many, many years. And when you go into the ground and you know that you're watching the pitch that Sir Bobby played on, it just means something. And I would rather that than go somewhere new that looks amazing that doesn't have that. I get what Gary says about I'm not overly emotional about it, and a lot of you won't be, but you've got to respect the people that are. But what I will say is if they decide to knock Old Trafford down and build a new one, I'm not going to be there chaining myself to the ground like, some people do chained to a tree. It just won't be it's not what I would do, but it won't be on my hands. And it's up to Sir Jim and everybody else to do what they want to do. It's not like, don't sign this player, don't sign that player. I'll respect whatever they decide to do. I just would rather stay at Old Trafford because the amount of, I've been to Arsenal, Highbury has been regenerated into flats. What's got the biggest, I've been to the Highbury regeneration of the flats, and I've been to the Emirates. And I've got to say, when you stand outside Highbury, I feel more than I feel outside the Emirates. But that's the history, isn't it? So look, let's see what happens with it. Where would we play whilst the new one is built, says William. Well, I think the plan is you keep playing at Old Trafford until the day before the new stadium opens right next to it. And then you go from Old Trafford to the new one. For me, this is all about money. This is all about money. And I don't know why people would hide that it's about money. There's a lot of money that's going to go into that area. Gary Neville will know that. Sir Jim Radcliffe will know that. Manchester Council will know that. The Mayor of Manchester knows that. This is about money. It's all about money. Get that regeneration. Get some governmental money into it. It's all about money because Man United are in a terrible situation because of the Glazers. I know, as well as you know, that if you knock Old Trafford down, you've got nowhere to play. If you regenerate Old Trafford, you've got nowhere to play. So the logical thing from a money point of view, and I blame the Glazers for all of this, by the way. I don't blame Sir Jim. I don't blame anybody other than the Glazers. They could have... I went to Anfield in the summer. They're never going to leave Anfield because they've gradually built it year on year. They've looked after it. They haven't allowed it to rust. And they'll just keep building on Anfield. And Anfield hasn't got the space that we've got. Like, if we'd have just spent the money on Old Trafford over the last 20 years, we'd be fine. But the Glazers let it rot. The Glazers let it rust. So it's not Sir Jim's fault if we have to build a new stadium. It's the Glazers' fault. But effectively, because we've got no money, if you're Sir Jim, you build a new stadium, you keep playing in Old Trafford, you keep taking the receipts, you keep taking the season ticket money and everything like that, and then you play Man United against Everton on the Sunday, and then you open the new stadium on the following Saturday, and you play Man City. It will just be seamless, and it will save us a lot of money, won't it? Would it be like Spurs and hardly buying players, says William? I don't know. I mean, the government apparently going to put some money into it. I don't know how it works. How would a lineup with Rasmus and Xerxes look, says Mario Franco? I will come back to that in a moment. Just on the poll, by the way, new stadium, 46%. Renovate Old Trafford, 54%. So look, there is fair points and fair opinion on both sides. What I would say is, I think even if we built the best stadium in the world, for the rest of your life, when we're in that new stadium, there will be a pang for the Old Trafford. That's just normal. And our Real Madrid are at the Bernabeu still. Barcelona are at the Nou Camp still. Liverpool will be at Anfield for ages. We will lose our home. We will be one of those clubs that doesn't play at our original ground when that happens. And again, that's a reason for me why one of the biggest clubs in the world, we should have a home that's our home. But again, I blame the Glazers. It's not just 20 years of debt. It's not just 20 years of dividends. It's putting us in a position where we may need to knock Old Trafford down, which I think is the biggest sin of their tenure, to be honest with you. If you'd said to a Man United fan in 2005, in 20 years' time, Old Trafford will have to get knocked down because of these people, I think they would say that is the number one reason why they don't like them. Because debt, shit transfers, whatever, is big. But imagine that. These are the people, and they're still here. They still own the majority of our football club, and they are the reason Old Trafford is probably going to get knocked down. What a legacy. Anyway, let's go back to football. Where would we play whilst we built a new one? I think we've answered that, William. I hope we build an underground stadium just in case, says Hayens. And hopefully Ineos don't change the name of the stadium, says Julius. I think they will, to make money. Use Old Trafford parts in new stadium to preserve history, says Siraj. I don't think anyone's going to fall for that. I want to keep Old Trafford, but for FFP, a new stadium is essential to generate income, as Old Trafford will never be a 100k stadium. It could be, Adrian. Does stadium renovation also mean better training ground and better medical equipment and all of that, says Sakin? You can get all of that tomorrow, mate. You don't need a new stadium for it. Paul Woolley says, only problem with refurb is South Stand needs knocking down and they are struggling on size revamp for me. New, but keep Old Trafford, says Paul. And Paul Thompson says, evening, Mark. Great to see the number of build-up goals yesterday. Rasmus will thrive on cutbacks. Also, Mojo, hope you're well wherever you are, says Paul. But where is Mojo? This is starting to worry me a little bit. If you know, you know. Where is Mojo? Another positive for Rasmus is that McTominay's gone, because I think McTominay got in the way of a lot of these cutbacks and stuff that we had last season. We wish McTominay all the best, of course, but I do think that is going to be a big thing to not have him in dancing around the midfield, the box, getting in people's way. Let's talk about the football. Let's talk about Erik ten Hag. Now, two things I want to talk about. First of all, Erik ten Hag said that he would not hesitate to consider Antony starting against Crystal Palace. Now, I'm Ten Hag in, but if he starts Antony on Saturday, I'm Ten Hag out. Sack him. He's an absolute prat. That is a joke, by the way. It was meant to be comedic. But seriously, he cannot start Antony at the weekend. I think we heard from Ten Hag after the game yesterday that he spoke glowingly about Antony. I think something's gone wrong, reading between the lines, in relation to his attitude in training. Because before the game, I think it was a few days ago, he said something about you've got to earn it. You've got to earn the right to play. It was on Monday, wasn't it? I think it came out after the Southampton game. You've got to earn the right to play. And I think that what happened then is that Antony has obviously gone and trained well, because after the game yesterday, he said, I wouldn't hesitate to consider starting him against Crystal Palace. He's trained really well. He gets it. He's working really hard. So I think Antony, something's clicked that has allowed Antony to get praise from Ten Hag when he's not been getting any minutes at all. And I'm not here to turn it into the Antony show, but I think last night he did pass the ball a lot more precisely, and he was a better team player than he normally is, and there wasn't many running into blind alleys trying to do too much. So I thought that was good from Antony. But absolutely, you can't start him. I mean, I would be not happy. And I try not to judge a team until it's played. But I would be not happy if Antony started at the weekend. I mean, bloody hell. It's one thing putting Garnacho on the bench. It's another thing starting Antony. I mean, where would he start? Like, he can't start ahead of Ahmad, he can't start ahead of Garnacho, and he can't start ahead of Rashford. So I think it was Ten Hag just being encouraging, which he has to be as a manager, because you've got so many games coming up. And you don't want players to be disillusioned. I mean, if he'd said, look, he played well tonight, but he's got absolutely no chance of playing at the weekend, so he may as well go and book himself a show in London because we'll be playing at Selhurst Park. I've heard Phantom of the Opera's good. You may as well go and watch that. He's got absolutely no chance of starting on Saturday, but Ten Hag is doing the right thing by saying that, you know, he's doing the things I want him to do. And basically what he's saying is, if I had a few injuries, would I consider Antony? I'd have no hesitation in throwing him in. Or if we're struggling on Saturday and everyone's playing shit, I'd have no hesitation in using him, which is absolutely fine. But yeah, he's not going to start him. He doesn't deserve to be started, and that's not because he played badly. But obviously, we've got better ahead of him at the moment. But there is this obsession with Antony that I just think is a bit weird, and most of it gets driven by the media in the UK. But it's a weird obsession. Ever since he did that spin, was it Robbie Savage who was commentating at the time? And it just seemed to start from there. It was just a pile on another foreign player, and he isn't actually as bad as people think he is. I think that's one of the things. It's almost like he's the worst footballer to ever play football, and he's not. He's just not an £80 million player. And that's the issue with Antony. I still think that even last night was better than some of what we've seen from him. And imagine if last night was to be the start of a more consistent Antony playing like that, and he gets a little bit better, you know, I think we'd end up with a half-decent player. So the problem is he's not worth £80 million. So I just think with Antony, very similar to Harry Maguire, very similar to Christian Eriksen, they're not in my starting 11, and they're not even my backup 11, really. But as an option, they are very, very good. I mean, Maguire's fourth choice at best when Yoro's fit. So, you know, Antony's fourth choice at best. Eriksen's probably fourth choice at best in his position when everybody's back. But they're valuable members of the squad. And as rotational players, really, really important. I mean, you've got Koundé today, Rodri yesterday, Alisson yesterday, all talking about potential strikes because of the amount of games footballers are playing. And I think that's coming down the line, by the way. They're all talking about it. What does that suggest? It suggests that players are playing too many games. Therefore, squads are going to be really important. Last night, turning point for many last season flops, says Rizik. Hope you're well. I'm happy Rasmus is back as well. Thank you very much, mate. Joseph Finch says, I'd rather we keep Old Trafford, but I've seen the AI-generated new Old Trafford pictures, and some of them are unbelievable. I know it's fake, but wow. Joseph, just on that, Man United can probably build one of the best stadiums the world's ever seen, but it won't be Old Trafford for me. And, you know, the shiny new paint will wear off in a couple of years, but Old Trafford won't be here anymore. And that's what I'm saying. I'm fully aware of the shiny new toy syndrome. You know, we've all had it at Christmas, but come the middle of the year, do you still feel the same about it? Or do you start playing with your old toy again? I just think, for me, you can make it as shiny as you like. It won't be the same. It won't be the same. And you can't go back once you've done it, can you? But look, I'm not saying you're wrong if you want to. Like, I'm not saying you're wrong. And I certainly won't be, protesting for us to do it. I just would rather we didn't do it. I understand why they're doing it as well, by the way. Is it possible to play in a temporary stadium until we renovate Old Trafford? Also, can you update on the young Arsenal player we're about to sign, says Jude. There is no update on the young Arsenal player that we're about to sign. We are going through the process with him and the Crystal Palace player at the moment to finalise those deals. But both players want to come to Man United. Both players will come to Manchester United. So, yeah. When we know, we know with those. When we know, we know. And obviously very exciting players along with Kone as well. There was, look, just on the Antony stuff, I wasn't going to mention this, but I will. There was a certain Pratt who basically said that, was talking about Antony again. And they're always talking about Antony. Or they're obsessed with Antony on this particular mainstream outlet. Absolutely obsessed. They never shut up about him, even though he's hardly played for us this season. And they were saying that at £25 million, if you don't do very well, you're a waste of money. But at 85 million, you've got to look at the manager and blame him because he knew who the player was. And I thought, what a crock of shit. So you're now talking about a player that no one's talking about but not only are you talking about the player, you're using it as a way to go in on Ten Hag, because you can't go in on Ten Hag at the moment because we've won our last 2 games. It's just incredible how certain elements of this media work to always try and twist their way into having a pop at Ten Hag, and it normally is a lot to do with Antony as well. Last time I checked, if you buy a player that you know and they flop, that doesn't mean you lose your job. And last time I checked, Erik Ten Hag said he wanted Antony at the start of that summer. It was Arnold and Murta who fucked the deal up and ended up paying £80 million at the end of the window. It wasn't Erik Ten Hag sat there going, pay £80 million. So I don't know why Ten Hag always gets attached to the fees that we pay, because all he can say is, I want that player in the world that buys a player that doesn't do that well. I don't really get the correlation between Antony doesn't work out, so Ten Hag's a bad manager, which is basically what they're trying to say. And I also don't necessarily feel that Antony is... sorry, it's frozen. I don't know why it's frozen, because I've got no dropped frames again. Let me have a quick look. Oh, it's mad. I don't know why. I don't know why it does it, because I get an alert on mine when it does it, so I don't really know. Stream health. Stream is healthy. So it can't have gone for everybody. It's weird. It probably went for some and not for everybody. I don't know what that was all about. Anyway, I don't know where you lost me, but what I was saying is it just becomes so tedious how they angle a way to take a pop at our manager. Right, Erik Ten Hag is not the first guy to buy a player and they flopped. He's not the first manager to spend a lot of money on a player and they flopped. Pep Guardiola has had numerous players flop, and also so has Jurgen Klopp, so has many Arsenal managers as well, so has Sir Alex Ferguson. So I don't really get the point. I don't get the relevance of it. Everybody knows that certain players are going to flop and certain players aren't. We just don't know who is and who isn't. Jadon Sancho was 75 million, he flopped. Maguire's not been worth 80 million pounds. Paul Pogba, 89 million, wasn't worth 89 million, was it really? So, I mean, even as a club ourselves, we've had managers who've flopped, and that's fundamentally because we haven't had a structure above. When I look at the signing of Antony, I don't blame Ten Hag. I blame the fact that we never had the structure that we've got now. I mean, my point is, and I've gone on a long journey here, is that under the current structure, we'd never sign Antony now. That doesn't mean that Ten Hag wouldn't be the manager. I think people get too locked in on blaming Ten Hag or Ollie or whatever, when actually the way I look at Man United now in this world of change, where we're talking about new stadiums and we're talking about new styles of play, etc., the way I look at Man United now is I don't even judge anything that happened before this summer, because I know it was shit. And I know why it was shit. Talking about spending £80 million on Antony is completely and utterly irrelevant as saying, why did we spend £60 million on Casemiro? These deals won't get signed off anymore. There ain't no way Casemiro would have been signed under an Ineos structure. There's no way Antony would have been signed for 80 million under this structure, because we wouldn't have been that chaotic and we wouldn't have been that desperate and we wouldn't sign off those checks. So it's an irrelevance. The bottom line is we are still stuck with legacy players from mistakes of the past. A lot of those are to do with managers and structure from the past. Some of them are to do from Ten Hag's reign that wouldn't happen under this structure. And the whole point of Ten Hag and Ineos agreeing to work together was to sweep all those mistakes under the carpet and work together properly so they don't happen again. Basically what I'm saying is, when you hear fans or so-called media experts going back talking about how much we paid for Antony, just shut them down. It's an irrelevance, because it's not relevant anymore, because that was the whole point of the strategic review and the decision to keep for Ten Hag. Part of that strategic review would have been how many goals we didn't score last year, how many games we lost last year, finishing 8th in the league last year. But it also would have been spending £80 million on Antony. That whole strategic review will have taken into account every negative element you can think of about Ten Hag, and then balancing it against all the positives and going, what's the decision going to be? So harking back to spending £80 million on Antony is an irrelevance. The only thing relevant about Antony now is what we do with him. We can't keep judging people on mistakes of the past that have already been part of a review of a new ownership. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Antony, and I certainly can't predict it. But long term, he's probably going to end up leaving. But I think if he can show what he showed last night and show some value, then we might end up recouping 30 million for him, maybe a little bit more. Hi Mark, you're one of the best parts of supporting this club for the last 10 years. No other team has anything like this, says Nelson. Thank you very much, Nelson. Thanks for being a member for 41 months. And Lockish says, people rooting for the new stadium instead of renovating Old Trafford are not United fans. How can we abandon our home? Oh, no, we're not going to go down that. I know plenty of United fans who want to go to a new stadium. I think it's a divisive comment, but, you know, each to their own. Solid Blake says they'll want a new stadium to be multi-purpose so it can stage more than just football games to generate more income. It is a cash grab, mate. I mean, I don't know whether Sir Jim will come out and say it publicly, but we all know it is. And I don't think there's any shame in that. This is about money. It's about a club that's on its knees financially and an area that needs regenerating, where they will try and build a stadium with as much financial help as they can, with a long-term view to make as much money as they can, because ultimately there's a lot of money to be made in football, and Man United want to be at the top of football. Is it? Thank you very much for that. Last night, Turin, point for many last season flops. Oh, turning point. I've read that one. I thought you said Last Night in Turin, which is a very, very good documentary about football. We need to do a documentary called Finding Mojo, says Alias. I am getting a little bit worried about it. I mean, there's not a lot I can do, any more than you lot can do, in relation to where he is. Ange's last 15 Premier League games, 17 points out of 45, says Mario. 4 points in his first league games, but everyone wants to talk about Ten Hag. Good point. Good point. People don't realise that if Erik Ten Hag had stayed at Ajax, he might have become Liverpool's manager and been hailed as the next Pep Guardiola, says Abhijit. Oh, he would have done. He would have ended up with a big job. And it's not like Ajax have done well since he left. Talking about Ajax, there was a little bit of a link with Christian Eriksen going to Ajax in the summer. He's been speaking about his future or what happened in the summer. And basically he said, where did I write it down? He basically said, if they told me to leave, then, you know, maybe something would have happened, but they didn't. And I'm somebody that puts a value in being happy and my family being happy, and I'm happy in Manchester. So basically, that's what Eriksen had to say, that nobody actually told him that they wanted him to go. It's an irrelevance because he's here to stay for this season anyway now, and he played very well last night. But I think, you know, whether United told him to go or not, I would hope that they didn't, because, you know, anybody with a brain knows that you can't tell a player with 1 year left on their contract who's on 150k a week to go, because you're not going to get any buyers anyway. I mean, just his wage is ridiculous if you're trying to move him on with 1 year left to go on his contract. So I think Eriksen was always staying for his final year. I don't think he'll get a new contract, but he played well last night, and it's the sort of player that really we have got a lot of options in the midfield now if everybody can stay fit. Agate, Casemiro, Mainu, Collier, Mount, Bruno, Eriksen. That's seven options in 3 positions. So I just think, similarly to Maguire and similarly to Casemiro and similarly to Lindelof, you know, those 4 players, it would have been nice to move them on as well. But the fact that they haven't been moved on, they're part of the squad now, and we may as well utilise them. And, you know, they'll be wanting to put themselves in the shop window. They're going to be out of contract next summer. So, yeah, I mean, well, I don't think Maguire is out of contract. I think there's a +1. But you wouldn't want to give him a +1 on 190k a week, would you, really? So, yeah. It's either that or with all the memberships gifted, the bank has caught up with him, says Gavin. Mojo, yeah. I was at the match last night. Antony played well. I'm glad he took the penalty, says Jimmy. And I'm live on That's Football in a few minutes. I am. You're right. Okay, I better wrap up, actually. Thanks to everybody for tuning in tonight. Don't forget Boohoo Man. Really enjoyed the show, actually. We've had that. I always know it's a good show when it flies by, and we've basically just done 40 minutes really, really quickly. So absolute legends as always. If you want to continue the chat, it's a bit of a Ask Me Anything night on Champions League watch along tonight. So get yourself over to That's Football. If you're missing the 8 o'clock slot, I will be there on That's Football in a couple of minutes. Legends tonight. Good news about Rasmus. Get your comments in if you're not watching live. Lots to discuss there. The stadia. Where does Rasmus fit in? Antony debate as well. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you on That's Football in a minute or two.